The sleek silver pod hissed open as it settled on the dusty ground. Lyra stepped out, her pale blue skin catching the morning sunlight. She blinked her large, almond-shaped eyes against the brightness. Earth's sun was more intense than the simulations had prepared her for. "So this is Earth," she whispered, looking around at the vast desert landscape. Miles of sand and rock stretched in all directions, broken only by the occasional cactus or scrubby bush. Behind her, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. A vehicle was approaching. Lyra quickly pressed a small button on her wrist. Her skin shimmered for a moment, then changed to a human tan color. Her eyes shrunk slightly, and her pointed ears rounded. To any observer, she now looked like a young human woman with light brown hair. The jeep pulled up, and a man hopped out. He was tall with sun-darkened skin and short brown hair. His face was serious, but not unfriendly. "You must be the exchange student," he said, looking her up and down. "I'm Tom, your guide for this field study." Lyra extended her hand, just as she had practiced. "I'm Lyra. Thank you for meeting me." Tom shook her hand firmly, then glanced around. "Where's your luggage?" Lyra patted the small pack at her side. "I travel light." Tom raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. "Well, we've got a long drive ahead of us. The research station is about 3 hours from here." As they drove, Lyra stared out the window, comparing everything she saw to the detailed simulations she had studied for years. Her people, the Vestans, had been watching Earth for centuries, creating what they believed were perfect virtual models of the planet and its inhabitants. "First time in the desert?" Tom asked, breaking the silence. "First time on E." Lyra caught herself. "In America, yes." "Where are you from originally?" His eyes remained on the road, but Lyra sensed his question wasn't just friendly conversation. "A small country. Very far away." "You wouldn't know it," she answered, using the response her trainers had prepared. Tom nodded slowly. "You know, it's funny. Your paperwork came directly from some very high offices, not the usual channels for exchange students." Lyra felt her heart rate increase. The Vestan Council had assured her that all arrangements had been made properly with Earth authorities. Had there been a mistake? "I'm part of a special program," she said carefully. "I bet you are." Tom's voice had an edge to it. "Look, I know what you are." Lyra froze. Had her disguise failed already? "You're some kind of spy, right? Industrial espionage." "The government doesn't tell me everything, just said to keep an eye on you." Relief washed over her. He was suspicious, but he didn't know the truth. "I'm just a researcher," she said, which was technically true. Tom laughed. "Sure you are. Well, whatever you're really doing here, the desert doesn't care. It'll kill you just the same if you're not careful." Lyra looked out at the harsh landscape. The simulation hadn't captured this feeling. The overwhelming emptiness, the oppressive heat, the sense of being so small under the vast blue sky. "It's beautiful," she said. Tom gave her a surprised look. Most people don't see it that way at first. They just see the danger. "Sometimes the most dangerous things are the most beautiful," Lyra replied, thinking of her mission. She was here to evaluate whether humans were ready for official first contact with Vestans. "We'll see if you still think that after a week out here," Tom said. "The desert has a way of stripping away illusions." Lyra smiled slightly. Little did Tom know, stripping away illusions was exactly what she had come to do. Both her people's illusions about humans, and perhaps her own. By midday, the heat had become unbearable. Lyra wiped sweat from her forehead for the 5th time in as many minutes. In the simulations, desert heat had registered as a mere number -105 degrees Fahrenheit. The reality was something else entirely. It pressed down on her like a physical weight. "We need to stop," Tom announced, pulling the jeep over beside a large rock formation. "Engines running hot. Best to let it cool before we push on." Lyra stepped out of the vehicle, her legs wobbling slightly. Earth's gravity was stronger than she had prepared for. The simulations had accounted for the 1.2 times difference in gravity between Vesta and Earth, but experiencing it was entirely different. "You okay?" Tom asked, watching her carefully. "Just a little tired," she said, "not used to the heat." Tom nodded. "Nobody is at first. Here." He handed her a water bottle. "Drink. More than you think you need." Lyra took a long drink. The water was warm but refreshing. She looked around at the vast landscape. There were no signs of human civilization in any direction. "Is it always this empty?" she asked. Tom laughed. "That's what makes the desert special. All this space makes a person feel small." He was right. On Vesta, their cities stretched from horizon to horizon. Open space was rare and precious. Here, it seemed endless. "Let's move into the shade," Tom suggested, pointing to the rock formation. "I'll check the engine." As they sat in the limited shade, Lyra pulled out her data tablet, disguised to look like a simple notebook. She made notes about the differences between her experience and the simulations, the way the sand shifted beneath her feet, the smell of the hot earth, the surprising variety of small life forms scurrying between rocks. "Your research must be pretty important," Tom said, looking over at her notebook. "It is to me," Lyra replied honestly. "My people, my university, thinks they understand Earth. I'm not sure they do." Tom wiped grease from his hands. "Nobody really understands this place until they've spent time here. Books and pictures don't capture it." "Simulations don't either," Lyra murmured. "What's that?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "How's the vehicle?" Tom frowned. "Not good. Radiator crack. We got water, but it won't hold for long. There's a small outpost about 15 miles ahead. We'll have to try to make it there." 3 miles later, the Jeep gave out completely. Black smoke poured from under the hood. "That's it," Tom said, grabbing his pack. "We walk from here." Lyra looked at the sun, still high in the sky. "How far?" "About 12 miles. We won't make it by nightfall." Lyra felt a flutter of panic. Her temperature regulation was already struggling. "What do we do?" "We camp," Tom said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The nights get cold. We'll need shelter." As the sun began to set, they found a small hollow between two large rocks. Tom gathered scrubby brush and built a small fire. Lyra watched in fascination. Fire-making wasn't something Vestans had done for millennia. "You're good at this," she said. "Army training," he replied. 2 tours in places not that different from here." As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly. Lyra looked up at the night sky and gasped. The stars. They were so much brighter than in the simulations, thousands upon thousands of them spread across the darkness. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Tom said, following her gaze. "Yes," Lyra whispered. In my country, we don't see stars like this." Tom threw another branch on the fire. "You know what's funny? Most people who live on Earth never really see Earth. They're too busy with their phones and jobs and problems." In the flickering firelight, Lyra studied Tom's face. There was wisdom there that the Vestan simulations had never captured. Perhaps humans were more than her people had assumed. "Tell me about surviving in the desert," she said. "What should I know?" As Tom began to share his knowledge, Lyra realized how much her species had missed in their observations. The simulations couldn't prepare her for this reality, harsh, beautiful, and infinitely more complex than she had imagined. Morning came with a strange heaviness in the air. Tom sniffed the wind and frowned. "We need to move now," he said, kicking dirt over the remains of their fire. Lyra was still stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. "What's wrong?" "Dust storm coming." Tom pointed to the horizon where a faint brown haze was visible. "Trust me, we don't want to be caught in that." They packed quickly and began walking. The sun was barely up, but the heat was already building. Lyra's legs ached from the previous day's hike, and Earth's gravity felt even heavier today. "How far to the outpost?" she asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. Too far to reach before that storm hits us, Tom admitted. We need to find shelter. The brown cloud grew larger behind them, moving faster than Lyra thought possible. The wind picked up, carrying small bits of sand that stung her skin. There, Tom pointed to a dark opening in a nearby cliff face. A cave. Run. They sprinted toward the cave entrance as the sky darkened behind them. The wind howled now, whipping at their clothes and hair. Just as they reached the cave mouth, the full force of the storm hit. It was like a solid wall of sand and dust. Inside the cave, they collapsed, breathing hard. The entrance was now a swirling brown curtain as the storm raged outside. "We're safe for now," Tom said, pulling a flashlight from his pack. "These storms can last hours or days." The beam of light showed a cave that extended deeper than expected. The walls were smooth in places, rough in others. "We should check if there's a back way out," Lyra suggested. Tom nodded, and they moved deeper into the cave. As the light from the entrance faded, Lyra began to feel nervous. The darkness was complete except for Tom's flashlight. "Battery's getting low," Tom said as the light dimmed. "Better save it." He clicked off the flashlight, and they were plunged into total darkness. Lyra hesitated, then made a decision. She reached for the small device on her wrist and pressed a sequence of buttons. Immediately, a soft blue glow emanated from her skin, lighting the cave around them. Tom stared at her, his eyes wide. "What the?" "I'm not what you think I am," Lyra said quietly. Tom's hand moved to his belt where Lyra knew he kept a knife. "What are you?" "I'm a researcher, like I said. But I'm not from Earth." The words felt strange to say out loud after so much secrecy. To her surprise, Tom laughed. "I knew you weren't a normal exchange student. But alien? Actually, it explains a lot." "You're not afraid?" Lyra asked, confused. Tom shrugged. "Lady, I've seen things in war zones that scared me a lot more than a glowing blue woman. Besides, if you wanted to hurt me, you could have done it while I was sleeping." Relief washed over Lyra. She let her human disguise fade completely, revealing her true form. Blue skin, larger eyes, slightly pointed ears. "I knew from the beginning," Tom admitted. "Or at least I knew you weren't who you claimed to be. Military intelligence briefed me before I picked you up. They tracked your landing. So this was all a test." Lyra felt a flash of anger. "Call it observation. They wanted to see your intentions." Tom sat down on a rock. "So, why are you really here?" Outside, the storm howled, but inside the cave, a different kind of barrier was breaking down. "My people have been watching Earth for centuries," Lyra explained. "We created simulations, studied your broadcasts, but never made direct contact. I was sent to see if the simulations were accurate, if humans were ready to meet us." "And what's the verdict?" Tom asked. Lyra thought about the past 2 days, how different reality had been from the simulations, how Tom had helped her despite his suspicions. "Your people are stronger than we thought," she said honestly. "More adaptable. Our models didn't capture that." Tom nodded. "Humans are good at surviving. It's what we do best." As the storm raged outside, they talked through the night, two species sharing knowledge for the first time, trapped together in a cave while nature reminded them both of its power. Morning came, though inside the cave it was hard to tell. The only sign was the dim light filtering through the dust-filled cave entrance. The storm had died down somewhat, but outside was still a brown haze. "We should try to leave now," Tom said, gathering his things. The storm could pick up again. They made their way to the entrance, but stopped short. A wall of fallen rocks blocked most of the opening. The storm had caused a rock slide. "No," Lyra whispered, touching the pile of rocks. "We're trapped." Tom examined the blockage carefully. "Maybe not completely. There's space at the top. I might be able to clear enough rocks for us to squeeze through." He began moving stones, careful not to disturb the larger ones that might cause another slide. After an hour of work, Sweat dripped from his face. "Just a few more," he said, reaching for a large rock wedged near the top. "Tom, wait," Lyra called, seeing the danger. Too late. As Tom pulled the rock free, others shifted. A cascade of stones fell, and Tom jumped back with a cry of pain. A heavy rock had landed on his leg. Lyra rushed to his side. "Don't move." She carefully removed the rock and examined his leg. It wasn't broken, but badly bruised and cut. Blood seeped through his torn pants. "It's fine," Tom said through gritted teeth. "Just a scratch." "No, it's not." Lyra helped him move away from the now even more blocked entrance, and the rock slide made the opening smaller. "We can't get out this way." Tom tried to stand, but winced in pain. "We need to find another way." Lyra eased him back down. "First, I need to treat your leg." She reached for her small pack and took out what looked like a thin silver cloth. Tom watched with curiosity as she wrapped it around his injured leg. "What is that?" "Healing wrap," Lyra explained. "It will clean the wound and speed healing. We use it for minor injuries." "Handy," Tom said. "What else do you have in that alien first aid kit?" "Not enough," Lyra admitted. "I wasn't prepared for an emergency like this." She took out her communication device, a small disc that glowed with symbols Tom couldn't read. "I'll try to call for help," she said, pressing symbols in a pattern. After several minutes, she put the device down with a sigh. "No signal. Earth's magnetic fields are stronger here than our models predicted. They're blocking the transmission." Tom laughed without humor. "So we're both stuck. No human rescue coming for me. No alien rescue coming for you." Despite the pain, Tom insisted on exploring deeper into the cave to look for another exit. Lyra helped him walk, supporting some of his weight. Her natural blue glow lit their way. "How long can you keep glowing like that?" Tom asked, as they moved slowly through the winding cave passages. "A few days," Lyra said. "It's a natural ability my species evolved. Our home planet has less direct sunlight than Earth." "Must be useful." "Not as useful as your ability to adapt," Lyra replied. "Humans survive in so many environments. My people would die quickly in this desert without technology." They stopped to rest after exploring for 2 hours with no sign of another exit. Tom's leg was swelling despite the healing wrap, and he had developed a slight fever. "Our supplies won't last long," Lyra said, checking their water. "Maybe 3 days." Tom closed his eyes. "On my world, we'd say we're in deep trouble." "On mine too," Lyra agreed. She studied his face, noticing the lines of pain. "You should rest. Sleep if you can." "Tell me about your home," Tom said quietly. "What's it like?" Lyra sat beside him and began to describe Vesta, the crystal cities that rose into the pink sky, the liquid metal oceans that reflected the light of 2 moons, the gentle gravity that let her people build structures that would collapse on Earth. As Tom drifted into an uneasy sleep, Lyra checked his forehead. It was hot with fever. The wound was worse than she had thought. Without proper medical care, infection would spread. She looked around the dark cave, feeling truly afraid for the first time. The simulations had never prepared her for this. Lyra couldn't sleep. Tom's fever had grown worse during the night, his breathing shallow and rapid. The healing wrap had slowed the infection but couldn't stop it completely. She needed to find help or another way out. With Tom resting, she decided to explore deeper into the cave. The blue glow of her skin lit the way as she ventured into passages they hadn't checked before. The cave system was larger than she had expected. Tunnel after tunnel branched off in different directions. She marked her path with small glowing dots from her pack so she wouldn't get lost. After an hour of searching, the narrow passage she was following suddenly opened into a large chamber. Lyra gasped. The ceiling rose high above her, and the walls. The walls were covered with paintings. Ancient drawings stretched across the rock surface. Handprints, animals, and human figures covered the stone. But what made Lyra freeze in place was a section near the back of the chamber. There, clearly visible, were figures that were not human. Tall, slender beings with blue skin and large eyes. Beings that looked exactly like her own species. Impossible, she whispered, reaching out to touch the ancient art. The drawings showed the blue beings standing with humans, pointing to the sky. In another scene, they appeared to be teaching humans to use tools. In a third, they stood beside a shape that could only be a spacecraft. Lyra's mind raced. According to all Vestan records, they had never made direct contact with humans before. They had only observed from a distance. These paintings suggested otherwise. Her people had been here thousands of years ago. She took out her data recorder and began documenting everything. The council needed to see this. Lyra. Tom's weak voice echoed from the tunnel. Where are you? She hurried back to find him leaning against the wall, barely able to stand. You shouldn't be walking, she scolded, helping him back to their small camp. Woke up. You were gone, he mumbled. His skin was hot to the touch. I found something, Lyra said, easing him down. Something important. When you're stronger, I'll show you. Tom's eyes were glassy with fever, not getting stronger without medicine. Lyra knew he was right. The infection was winning. She made a decision. I'm going to try something, she said, reaching into her pack. She pulled out a small vial of liquid that glowed faintly purple. This is Vestan medicine. It might help, but I don't know how it will affect a human. Tom gave a weak laugh. Can't make me feel worse. Lyra carefully lifted his head and helped him drink the medicine. He grimaced at the bitter taste. Rest now, she said. I'll check the entrance again, see if the storm is cleared. While Tom slept, Lyra returned to the chamber with the paintings. She studied them carefully, trying to understand what they meant for her mission. When she returned, Tom was awake and looking better. The medicine was working. Your alien stuff packs a punch, he said, sitting up. Fever's down. Good, Lyra said. Can you walk? There's something you need to see. She helped him to the chamber and watched his face as he saw the wall paintings. These are old, Tom said, touching the stone. Really old. Thousands of years. Look at these figures, Lyra pointed. Do they remind you of anyone? Tom studied the blue beings and then looked at Lyra. His eyes widened. They're your people, he said. But that would mean. My species has been to Earth before, Lyra finished. Long before our official records show, we didn't just observe humans. We interacted with them. Tom moved closer to the paintings, examining the scenes of Vestans and humans working together. Your people might have helped shape human civilization, he said slowly, and then left. Why? Lyra shook her head. I don't know. None of this is in our history. Tom looked at her with new understanding. Seems like humans aren't the only ones with lost history. Your people have secrets too. As they stood before the ancient art, Lyra felt her understanding of her own species shifting. The truth was more complex than she had been taught. Just like Earth itself. 3 days had passed since they discovered the ancient paintings. Their water supply was almost gone. Tom's condition had improved thanks to the Vestan medicine, but he was still weak. The infection had retreated but not disappeared completely. We need to make a decision, Tom said as they shared the last of their food. Wait for rescue or try to find another way out. Lyra had explored every tunnel in the cave system. There was no other exit. No one knows exactly where we are, she said. Your people think we're somewhere along the original route. My people don't even know I'm in trouble. Tom nodded slowly. So we make our own rescue. How? Lyra asked. Your emergency beacon, Tom said. The one you didn't want to use because it would reveal your technology to my government. Lyra hesitated. Using the emergency beacon would mean exposing her true nature to human authorities beyond Tom. It could compromise the entire mission. If I use it, your military will know about my people for certain. The council wanted controlled contact, not an emergency revelation. Tom laughed weakly. I think the ship has sailed with those cave paintings. Besides, we'll die if we stay here much longer." He was right. Lyra reached into her pack and pulled out a small silver disc. "This will send a signal that my ship can detect from orbit," she explained. "But I need to be outside the cave for it to work properly." Tom looked at the blocked entrance. "We've tried moving those rocks." "There might be another way," Lyra said. "I found a narrow crack in the ceiling of the painting chamber. It might lead to the surface." The crack was barely wide enough for Lyra's slim body. Tom, larger and injured, couldn't possibly fit through. "I'll go," Lyra said. "You stay here." Tom grabbed her hand. "Be careful. The desert sun is brutal this time of day." Lyra nodded. Her species was sensitive to direct sunlight, another reason they had always observed Earth from a distance or at night. The climb was difficult. The crack twisted upward through solid rock, sometimes so narrow Lyra had to exhale completely to squeeze through. Her skin scraped against the rough stone, leaving painful blue marks. After what felt like hours, she saw light above. With a final push, she emerged onto the surface of the desert. The sudden brightness was blinding. The heat hit her like a physical blow. Lyra activated the beacon immediately. Its soft pulse confirmed the signal was transmitting. Now she just had to wait. But the sun was more intense than she had anticipated. Her skin, evolved for a world with less direct sunlight, began to burn within minutes. Her temperature rose dangerously. Vestan biology wasn't made for Earth's harsh conditions. "Just a little longer," she gasped, seeking the small shadow of a rock. Her vision blurred. Her skin, normally blue, had turned an alarming purple color. She was experiencing heat stroke. The simulations had mentioned this danger but hadn't conveyed how quickly it could happen. As darkness began to creep into the edges of her vision, Lyra heard a sound in the distance, a rhythmic thumping that grew louder. She forced her eyes open and saw shapes in the sky. Helicopters. Had they detected her beacon? Or had Tom's people been searching all along? She tried to stand, to wave, but her body wouldn't respond. The last of her strength was gone. As consciousness slipped away, Lyra saw the helicopters growing larger, descending toward her position. She couldn't tell if they were coming as friends or enemies. Her last thought before darkness took her was of Tom, alone in the cave, waiting for a rescue that might never find him. The sound of rotor blades faded as Lyra collapsed on the burning sand. Lyra woke to the steady beep of machines. The ceiling above her was white and smooth. She blinked, trying to clear her vision. This wasn't the cave or the desert. Where was she? "Welcome back," said a familiar voice. She turned her head to see Tom sitting beside her bed. His leg was bandaged, but he looked much healthier. "Where am I?" Lyra asked, her voice hoarse. "Secret government facility," Tom said with a small smile. "Don't worry, it's the friendly kind." Lyra looked down at her hands. They were their natural blue color. No disguise. "They know what I am," she said. It wasn't a question. Tom nodded. Hard to hide when they picked up an unconscious blue woman in the desert. Plus, your beacon wasn't exactly subtle. Every satellite in orbit noticed it. "Are we prisoners?" Lyra asked cautiously. "Honored guests," Tom corrected. "Your willingness to risk your life to save mine changed a lot of opinions. Mine included." An older man in a military uniform entered the room. He had gray hair and kind eyes that didn't match his serious expression. "General Adams," Tom introduced him. "My boss." "Miss Lyra," the general said, nodding politely. "Glad to see you recovering. Your physiology is quite remarkable." "Thank you for saving us," Lyra said. "Actually, we should thank you," the general replied. "Your emergency signal led us to both of you, and to something else even more valuable." He placed a tablet on her bed. It showed images of the cave paintings they had discovered. "We found similar art in 3 other locations," he explained. "All hidden, all showing the same blue beings. We thought they were myths or spiritual symbols. Now we know better." Lyra studied the images with wonder. My people have been here before. Many times, it seems, the general said. The earliest paintings date back 12,000 years. The most recent, only 2,000. But why isn't this in our records? Lyra wondered aloud. Perhaps your council knows more than they shared, Tom suggested. A week later, Lyra was fully recovered and standing in a conference room. On one side sat human officials, military, scientific, diplomatic. On the other side, to her amazement, stood 3 Vestans. Her emergency beacon had brought not just rescue, but representatives from her world. The council has reviewed your findings, said Elder Marrow, the oldest of the Vestan delegation. What you discovered has forced us to confront a hidden chapter in our history. The elder activated a holographic display showing ancient Vestan texts. There was a time when our ancestors traveled widely, he explained to everyone. They visited many worlds, including Earth. They taught early humans certain skills, hoping to guide your development. Then why did they leave? Asked the human Secretary of State. Fear, Elder Marrow admitted. Not of humans, but of influencing you too much. Our ancestors believed each species should find its own path. They withdrew and erased many records of the contact to prevent future generations from interfering. Lyra stood between the two groups, no longer just a researcher, but a bridge. Both our species lost something valuable when that connection was broken, she said. Humans lost knowledge. Vestans lost perspective. My experience in the desert showed me how limited our understanding of humans has been. And what would you suggest now? General Adams asked. A new beginning, Lyra said. Not observation from a distance, but true exchange. Not as teachers and students, but as equals. As the formal negotiations began, Tom joined Lyra by the window. Outside, the desert stretched to the horizon, beautiful and harsh. Your illusions about Earth were shattered in that desert, Tom said. But maybe that's a good thing. Lyra nodded. The desert teaches harsh lessons, but important ones. Reality is always more complex than our models and simulations. And more interesting, Tom added with a smile. Yes, Lyra agreed, looking at the two species talking together after thousands of years apart. Much more interesting.